Lucas, favourite video game movie? Go.
It's definitely not Wreck-It Ralph. It's got to be Wreck-It Ralph 2, right? The better one.
You're joking, right? Disney's 2012 animated feature Wreck-It Ralph proved that video game movies can actually be great. Yes, the movie has original characters, unique worlds, references, Easter eggs, cameos. It has it all, and we should actually be very thankful for that. If things had gone a different way, if a few of the ideas had not been left on the cutting room floor, Wreck-It Ralph could have ended up going down the shitter. Literally.
What the?
So Lucas, you are the Disney aficionado of the team. We all talk about all the time about how Lucas loves Disney. So opinions on Wreck-It Ralph?
Wreck-It Ralph is up there as one of my favourite Disney films, and therefore one of my favourite films just in general.
So are your top films all Disney films?
Not all of them. I'm a big fan of the Cornetto trilogy and Scott Pilgrim vs. the World. As you can probably tell from Scott Pilgrim and Wreck-It Ralph being in my top films, I'm a big fan of the video gamey, referencey kind of movie.
So not films that are just a live action or whatever retelling of a video game story. Ones where the video game is, the fact that it is a video game is part of the plot.
Yeah, it's weird because, video game adaptations are not generally great. I have not watched The Last of Us yet, so I can't say for that. But, in terms of movies, Detective Pikachu and the Sonic movies are, they're okay, they're pretty good, but nothing's been, outstanding. Whereas, Wreck-It Ralph and Scott Pilgrim have managed to bunch in a load of references without actually being adaptations of video games themselves.
I think the reason it works in Wreck-It Ralph so well is because the main characters are all new, they're all original, whereas all of the cameos are other characters. Because this was something that was talked about behind the scenes. The director, Rich Moore, said he wanted to include cameos as side characters and not main characters, because those characters that already exist come with too much baggage, and there's a lot of expectations from the audience as to what those characters will do. Whereas if you have a new character, you've got a clean slate.
Yeah, Wreck-It Ralph, and Fix-It Felix, they both act as if they are retro video game characters, but as you say, there's no baggage that comes along, there's no expectation, but essentially, Wreck-It Ralph is Donkey Kong.
Yeah, I gave it a rewatch before writing the article. It's a list of facts for this particular video, and I found it interesting how similar it is in terms of the aesthetic, because it's still the square building, and then the character jumps up and down each thing, but obviously it's a completely unique game. Have you heard about what they did for the promotion of it, where they made a bunch of cabinets?
They made cabinets of the game.
So they made 75 unique Fix-It Felix cabinets, but not only did they make them authentic, so they made them with 80s hardware, and made somebody who knew about that kind of thing was the one who programmed them, but they also had somebody come in, professionally age all of the cabinets up uniquely. So every single cabinet had been aged differently, because they really wanted to sell the fact that it was supposed to be a real game in our world.
And none of them are in my house. Why is this? Why?
I genuinely thought it was real. I thought that they'd taken an old character from an old game that had never gone anywhere. It's only when you realise how similar the two are to Mario and, well, Jumpman, but Mario. But anyway, to jump back to Wreck-It Ralph, I know, Lucas, obviously you'll know a lot about the video game side of this, all the various cameos, the various actual characters that appear, plus we've talked before in Fat Fiend as well, about how Nintendo and Sega and everybody got really picky when it came to the way that some of their characters were represented. There was a dick measuring contest between which of the villains got to be the tallest, because everybody's like, no, my villain's taller than their villain. It's well, no, Mr. Robotnik is a tall man. He has to be taller than Bowser, which is why, if you notice in that scene, they're all the same height. Nobody is taller than anyone else.
It should have been that, Eggman's taller, but Bowser is widest. Right?
I would just... Yeah, but I'd have thought that Bowser was bigger than Eggman. If you think about the way they... look at them.
Eggman is huge, though. He's just got such long legs, he's got that model look going on.
But he's still meant to be a man. He's not supposed to be superhuman.
Yeah, but he's 4 times the size of Sonic, and Sonic is a 4-foot tall hedgehog.
So he's... 16 feet tall?
Potentially.
Enormous. He's just a Navi wandering around.
I want to do some fact checking.
Yeah, have a look. We're getting some live fact checking. Let's find out how tall people say that. Dr. Eggman / Robotnik. I hate the name Eggman. I don't know why, because there's nothing wrong with it. I just hate the name Eggman because I want to call him Dr. Robotnik.
Mr. Doctor. Dr. Robotnik.
To be fair, the Sonic.fandom.com just says he's 6'1", so realistically he should be way smaller than Bowser.
6'1"? So I mean that means that in the Wreck-It Ralph universe, Bowser is 6'1". I do find it funny that Carl is now canonically taller than all of the villains that are in Wreck-It Ralph. So back in the early days of Wreck-It Ralph's production, obviously, as you can imagine, the story was completely different. It wasn't actually about Wreck-It Ralph. The original game actually started production, or started talks, in the 80s. So the late 80s, there was an idea of a game called High Score. So I'm guessing what it was that the video games were becoming a thing, and somewhere in Disney, somebody was like, we should make a video game movie. And it just never went anywhere.
Yes, yeah.
And then in the late 90s, it changed again to a game called Joe Jump. So obviously, likely, Joe Jump is the one who evolved into Fix-It Felix, because he's like Jumpman. And then in the mid-2000s, they had another iteration of it called Reboot Ralph.
Oh, God.
No idea what that would have been about. Like, there's not a lot of details floating around about these because they were super early concepts. What we do know is some of the earlier ideas for what the film was going to be once it got into production. So before we talk about the main focal point of my research, which is the toilet, I want to go through one of the earlier ideas for the film, which got pretty far because there's actually animatics of this and read-throughs by some of the actors, not all of them because they weren't all there for the read-through at the start, but these are available on Disney Plus if people want to watch them. There's a few scenes from this earlier version, and the original storyline followed Ralph again, but Felix was there for a lot of it. So it was Ralph and Felix going off on an adventure together. I think what happened was Ralph left his game and Felix caught up with him. They explored all these different games trying to find parts for Vanellope's car.
Oh.
So they didn't just go to the car making factory, they went exploring for parts. And there's a point during the middle where Ralph ends up getting arrested. And then Ralph gets depressed and ends up being persuaded by this random NPC character that we never see in the final film to go and hang out in a weird Sims kind of game. The name of it is Extreme Easy Living 2, which is a cross between The Sims and Grand Theft Auto. Apparently, I see Lucas's face now. He's just like, "What are you talking about?"
But that's what's so fantastic about Wreck-It Ralph the movie, is that they've got multiple different video game universes which actually feel real and feel like they are real video games. And when you enter the Sugar Rush game, for example, that feels like that's a game that could be a competitor to Mario Kart that exists in real life.
Yeah, like I said, when I saw the games in the film, I genuinely thought they existed because they did such a good job on it.
Mm-hmm.
And there was a ton of stuff behind the scenes about how much effort went into creating the worlds of these games as well.
Yeah.
Obviously you'll have noticed everything in Wreck-It Ralph's world is square.
Yes, of
the
course,
square trees, the square food, even the smoke is square.
Square characters.
Yeah, Ralph, obviously, he moves a bit less rigidly than a lot of the other characters, but he does have square fingers, which I thought was quite interesting.
Mm-hmm.
His fingertips are proper little cuboid shapes.
And when he does the wrecking animation, he does really go into a proper 2D stomping style animation.
But then when you move into Hero's Duty, for example, everything's triangular and sharp, and there's all of this mist and haze. But then with Sugar Rush, they got in food photographers to make it look all tasty because they wanted it to look delicious.
It does look delicious.
Yeah, they had this soft lighting and less shadows to try and make it look as appealing as possible. So I've talked about this early concept that we can see examples of, but before that, there were even earlier ideas floating around. And this was super early days. All they had down was that they wanted to make a video game movie. And the concept was somebody who's been doing the same thing for 30 years just gets bored with their life. That was the whole basis of it. So originally, it wasn't going to be about Ralph. It was going to be about the Felix character. So Fix-It Felix was going to be the main character of this. He was going to be the one who got bored with his life. And Ralph was in it, but he wasn't Wreck-It Ralph back at this time. He was a weird beast creature with horns that was called Wendell Grubble.
What?
Wendell Grubble.
Wendell Grubble. I'm guessing that it's a play on Grendel and Rubble. Like Grendel from Beowulf, and then Rubble because he still lived in a trash heap. but apparently he would just throw rubbish at people. Like, he was meant to be this weird monster creature, and he never really had a fleshed out personality.
Oh, cool.
So back at that point, Felix was the main character, and they were throwing around these ideas of like, how can Felix escape his life? Because in the final film, they're all connected through the power outlet. And at any point, they can get on their little trains and they can go and visit other games. But I think the original idea was that they didn't know you could do this. Like, nobody knew you could travel between games. Felix was going to be the first one to discover it. And this is where the fact for today comes in. So they needed a way for Felix to get between his game and other games. And before they had this idea of this Grand Central Station building, it was going to be that Felix accidentally stumbled across a magical vortex in his toilet.
What was that now?
No,
Lucas,
I don't like this.
Lucas is speechless.
I don't like this at all. Like, it's not the movie flushed away. That shitty DreamWorks.
So, this came up. There was Rich Moore, the director, the screenwriter with Phil Johnson, a few other people were tossing around ideas, and this came up. This idea, I think, the way that it was described was that Felix was going to accidentally drop a nail into the toilet, and when he went to get it, he got transported into whether it be like a hub for the other games, or whether it be that he just gets transported through to a different game entirely. And they had this idea, and they were like, "Yep, that's it. This is what we're doing for this film. This toilet is staying in this film no matter what." For about 2 or 3 weeks, this idea was just there, and they never even questioned it. It was just, this is obviously how he's going to get transported.
The perfect idea.
Yeah, nothing wrong with this at all, until like that 2 or 3 week mark hit, and they just went back to it and were like, what's this got to do with video games?
Yeah.
Like, what has this got in any way to do with the arcade or the setting that we're trying to create? And in the end, they scrapped it, and they got the Grand Central idea from like a trip they both took to Grand Central Station. When it comes to researching for these articles, because obviously we do them on occasion now as well, I tend to find out something that sounds interesting and make sure I can find several sources that independently back it up. So with this one, the director mentions this in so many interviews, and it's always just a quick thing. That I think it must be like in the early stages, there's always a funny story to do with like when you're coming up with an idea. And this must just be the go-to. It's like there was a magic toilet.
Felix discovered a magical vortex in a toilet in his game.
The device that they're going to use to travel from game to game is that in a toilet there is a vortex.
And it just, as you say, it makes no sense that a toilet of all things would be the thing to like transport you, especially when it's like, oh yeah, I can't remember the Turbo-tastic guy's name.
Turbo.
Can you remember? Is it just Turbo? Yeah.
He's called Turbo, yeah, because they're all like, right, Doggo Turbo.
Turbo would have to jam a fucking go-kart down his toilet to be able to escape with it.
I guess, yeah, if you're ever watching Wreck-It Ralph, just remember that if a few decisions had been different, we could have been watching a movie where Fix-It Felix flushed himself down a toilet in order to go and explore those other games.
I mean, that would make it more canonical to the idea of him being Mario, because it's plumbing related.
Maybe that's where it came from.
Maybe. I don't know if you've seen like the Super Bowl advert of like the Mario and Luigi plumbing advert that is for the new Mario movie. It only came out like yesterday or whatever, a couple of days ago. And it's just a 30-second TV spot advert where it's promoting the new movie, and it is Mario and Luigi's TV advert for their plumbing business in that universe. And it's fantastic.
Is Chris Pratt's voice in it though? I'm gonna withhold judgment till I've seen it.
That movie looks like it's nailed everything apart from the voice of Mario, and maybe
it wasn't even that hard. It just had to not be Chris Pratt. Like, I obviously Charles Martinet would have been everyone's choice because that's what Mario sounds like.
But he's got no star power behind him, quote unquote.
I would say he does now, though. Like, we all know who he is because he plays Mario. Unless that's just me.
We do. But I don't think if you told, like, the average person that this movie stars Charles Martinet, that, like, that wouldn't be something that would sell you on a movie.
Yeah, I guess, like, when I met Tom Kenny, I've told people before, I met Tom Kenny. I've got a picture with Tom Kenny. They're always like, who?
Yeah.
Like, voice of SpongeBob.
One of the most prolific voice actors in the entire industry. And he's like, who? Who's that? Yeah, unfortunately, voice actors do not have that star-selling power just yet compared to modern Hollywood stars.
which is a shame.
It is, yeah.
Because it takes a lot of talent to do these, like, especially when you know that your appearance, your face, I don't know what word I'm looking for, isn't going to be in the final product. You have to put all of your emotion into the way that you present the voice. And that also lends to the way that the animators and things will animate a character.
Yeah, and it's a specific set of skills, which is why, like, a lot of times, similar to the argument you've seen with Chris Pratt now, is like, actors don't necessarily know how to be voice actors, and vice versa.
Yeah.
But like, there's a lot more, like as you say, like emotion and enthusiasm that has to come out of your voice when you can't be seen.
So before we finish, I want to have a chat with you about why you don't like Ralph Breaks the Internet. But before we do that, we just want to announce that we've mentioned the Patreon a few times. That's the side channel Patreon. There's a tier on that where we do a movie watch-along once a month. And this month's watch-along is happening tonight. And we are watching Wreck-It Ralph, which is why we're talking about it.
Oh, God.
I wanted to do a little bit of research into the background of how it was made, because I thought that would be interesting for people to hear. And then Lucas is going to be there as the video game aficionado expert. Carl may also make an appearance. He said he'd be interested to come, but we're trying to plan these with like a couple of people, and then other people come along.
Please never tell me that Carl's interested to come. That's not a sentence I want to hear.
Well, I didn't even think of it that way, and I bet no one else did. That's just you and your dirty mind. Get out of the gutter. Get out of the toilet.
Get out of that goddamn toilet, Lucas.
And Nisha said she'll pop along as well if she's available. But Wreck-It Ralph is a film that we all love. We think it's a great film. And we are looking forward to talking about it. There'll be like a text chat open for everybody who's there to chat, and we'll be talking over it, giving away some facts, giving some opinions. Likely I'll be nitpicking and getting angry at stuff, because that tends to be what I do when I watch films. But that's how I get my joy. And Lucas will get angry at me for making fun of one of his favourite films. So it'll all come full circle. Like a toilet, like a swirling in a toilet.
It's essentially like, a private Twitch stream where we definitely don't show a movie. Definitely not.
No. Just talk about
There's
it.
none of that business going on, but yes.
Yeah, no.
If you'd like to come and watch Wreck-It Ralph with the both of us, and potentially more, then hop along to patreon.com/untitled side channel, and you can join the friend tier where you can watch along with us.
So, Lucas, what's wrong with Ralph Breaks the Internet?
What isn't wrong with it? First of all, it's not called Wreck-It Ralph 2.
I don't understand why it isn't called Ralph Wrecks the Internet.
Yes!
It was that easy.
Yeah, I know. Like, oh, God.
Break the internet, it's like a thing.
Right, it's just wreck the internet kind of sounds better, doesn't it?
You're not wrong.
But just like, I enjoyed the premise, I enjoyed the initial trailers for that movie. The princess scene is incredible, but it generally just has a much, like, worse concept as a movie, I think.
So the first one was made about older games that were from a time before, like it was retro, and then it had retro stuff before that time as well.
Mm-hmm.
So because it was set at such a fixed place in time, it didn't feel dated. It felt like we were seeing a snapshot of a moment that we were all loosely familiar with. I think even behind the scenes, like they were worried that people wouldn't know some of the characters, but then they were. I can't remember who it was, but one of the people making it, like their kids said, "No, I've heard of Pac-Man. Like I might not have played it. I might not be familiar with a lot of the stuff about how the game works, but I have heard of Pac-Man."
And then they decided to throw Cubert in there.
Cubert, like the only real interaction I've had with Cubert is when I watched that fucking god-awful Pixels movie where Cubert turns into a woman and one of them fucks it.
What?
Anyway, Wreck-It.
No, let's not.
Wreck-It Ralph 2. So, and then with things like the internet, it's just everything changes so fast. And because it's modern, but then by the time they finish animating the film, the stuff that they've referenced is going to be out of date.
Exactly.
And then in 10 years' time, you can watch Wreck-It Ralph and be like, oh, arcades, that was a thing. But then the internet's still going to be a thing.
And it's like, it's based off like viral YouTube videos, and then a lot of like, the meme references and stuff were already out of date by the time it got in there, and yeah, it felt much more reactionary than Wreck-It Ralph did.
Yeah, and it did bug me that they made it about into the internet, but then didn't make it completely about internet games.
Mm-hmm.
Because I thought that would have been at least on topic of the film franchise, which is to explore other games.
Yeah, because the non-Grand Theft Auto game that Vanellope gets stuck in is like a cool idea, and like that's I think the stronger point of the film.
Like what they could have done is that when they plugged the internet in, all of these new characters and things kept turning up in their Grand Central Station because the internet's just vast and full of everything. They could have had these new characters just appearing out of nowhere, and
just all of a
Ralph
sudden, like Raid Shadow Legends start raiding the other games. It's like,
no, you just know, like the way that the Emoji Movie had like all of that random shit plugged. Like, just you know that Raid Shadow Legends would be in there. They would put their money on it. It's like when I saw Fortnite in Endgame. Like I like Fortnite. Played a lot of Fortnite. In fact, I played probably too much Fortnite. But when I saw it in Endgame, I was like, it took me out. It took me out of the film because they didn't need to show it prominently. We didn't need to know they were playing Fortnite, but by showing a close-up of the screen in high definition. So is there anything you like about Wreck-It Ralph 2?
Yeah.
To end on.
I think some of the
princess scene, obviously, you've already said.
The princess scene is fantastic. Like, some of the bits in the Grand Theft Auto verse are, like, pretty cool. And I also just think, like, some of the videos they make are genuinely quite funny.
So what I'm hearing is that what they should do is a Disney princess spin-off film with all of them.
God damn, yes.
They would make so much money.
Like,
just think of all the costumes you could put them in, all the locations.
The casual Disney princess fashion is, like, so good. So goddamn good. I'm, like, so jealous of some of the outfits. They have, like, the Mulan outfit. It's just like, give me those fits.